Williams and Tom Scales of Voice Today are our guest. In the other room, Jeff Chandler, his first time on the radio, too. We're excited to have Jeff aboard, and he's going to be bringing you worship over the next 3 hours. So first, let's start with the website that you're going to go to is thevoicemovement.com, or thevoice.org is probably easier to put in, right?
Voicetoday.org.
Voicetoday.org. Voice Today, you can actually link to our website, and it'll link you there, voicetoday.org, and it opens up a couple of things. It's the website will say thevoicemovement.com at the top, so don't let that throw you. So share a little bit about what The Voice Today is, when it started, how it started, why it started, and why it exists, and what you're doing, basically. How about that?
Well, I'm founder of Voice Today, and I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, and my perpetrator was my stepfather. So I was sexually abused from age 3 to age 17. I never broke my silence. I was threatened. My stepfather threatened to kill my mother if I ever told anyone. So I lived in this silent prison of pain. And
that's kind of common. It's
very common.
It's one thing to threaten the child, but if you're threatening someone else, you're using the love for that person against them, and that's even probably more damaging.
Most perpetrators will threaten a child in some way, their own safety or someone that they love. So at age 17, I felt like I had no choice but suicide. And praise God, I took 64 sleeping pills and drank a half a bottle of vodka, and I lived.
Wow.
And that was the lowest point of my life. And the next day, God just began to help me put one foot in front of the other. As an adult, I struggled with many destructive behaviors: alcoholism, drug addiction, relational issues, very low self-esteem, feeling damaged to a point, and really struggled with healing and found very few resources out there to help me.
And is this a reality, while we're on that topic, is so often because the church, we get very sin-focused, and someone's doing these issues, and we get so focused on trying to fix them, to make them stop doing these things, we never actually get down to the bottom of why they're doing those things.
Well, we laugh because there's 1,000,001 support groups at churches for drug addictions and cutting and being depressed, other destructive behaviors, but you rarely find one for survivors of child sexual abuse. And not all of these social ills are caused by child sexual abuse, but a high percentage is rooted in that, keeping that silent and that shame, and keeping bound up in that shame. So in my 40s, after I had gone through a season of healing, God really just called me to step out and to be a voice for the voiceless, to really bring this issue out of the closet in a big way. So Voice Today is an organization that is breaking the silence and the cycle in 3 ways. We want to educate society on this issue. Your child has a 20 to 30% chance of being sexually abused. Globally, that number goes up to 40 to 50% chance of being sexually abused. 90% of the threat comes from someone the child knows, loves, and trusts. We are trained as parents and as adults to be afraid of stranger danger. That is not where the majority of the danger comes from. The median age of abuse is 9 years old. So 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, it's reported by the CDC, will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. So that's a reality, and that's what's reported. Only 1 in 10 will ever tell. So that is the tip of the iceberg. So we are called to educate and to bring awareness. We have prevention programs. We teach adults how to protect children. It is, whether you have a child in your home or not, you are responsible for protecting children. 1 adult trained can protect 10 children when you think about nieces and nephews and neighbors. And then our third mission is healing and restoration. There are so many survivors, millions upon millions upon millions, 39 million reported. There's so many more than that need to break their silence, need to come out of that place and remove that shame and that burden that they carry and place it on the perpetrator, on the abuser. That's where that shame belongs. That was so many struggle with forgiveness. So many struggle with why, God, why did you let this happen to me? Not placing that blame on the perpetrator. That was their choice to sin against you, not God's will for your life.
Right.
So often they take blame themselves. They want to blame themselves as a child for not speaking out, not screaming, not saying no. Our society places a lot of shame on a survivor when they do speak out, both male and female. They tend to say, well, what they respond with, why didn't you tell? And what that does is heaps more blame and shame on that victim.
Right.
And they need a place to break their silence. They need a platform to be empowered. They need programs to heal. So we offer support groups, retreats. We offer workshops, a number of workshops that helps them to walk into that place of healing. So God's just called me to this season to really be a voice for the voiceless and really bring this issue into the public arena with very solid resources that we can have. We hope we're building a website that we hope will be a clearinghouse and unite organizations from all over the world to address this issue.
And could you slide your mic, or either you or slide your mic just there you go.
Okay.
It's hitting at your little headphone there. The scriptures tell us to defend the cause of the fatherless. And in these issues, a lot of the cases it's a person who doesn't have someone to defend them in the sense of a father. If a father often could be the very one that's victimizing a person, but in scriptural ways, a father is the one that's protecting them, is caring for them and guarding them. And so there's a huge need for that father to begin to rise up, or the defender, the voice, someone that can stand up and battle against this. Even this, one of the cards you gave over here, that when someone even goes to someone for help, a lot of times all they're going to do is put a bandage over the situation and never really get down to the heart of it. How through these programs are you accomplishing getting down to the very roots of this, and then what to do with it so you can go forth to find that freedom?
Well, first of all, realize that it's a crime. I think we have covered it up for so long in our families, and this is not something that's been happening for decades. This is something that's been happening since biblical times.
Yeah.
If you read 2 Samuel, where King David covered up the sexual abuse of Tamar from her half-brother. So it's an issue that has been silenced for so long. So just beginning to talk about the issue, beginning to break the silence, beginning to hold that perpetrator accountable. Because what so many victims and survivors fail to understand is when they don't break their silence, when they don't speak out, that abuser continues to abuse. Statistically, they can have up to 400 victims, a child molester, in their lifetime. So we have got to have the courage to come forward to break the silence. And how we handle that is we meet it with the blood of Jesus. We meet it with Christ-centered help, Christ-centered workshops, Christ-centered retreats, Christ-centered support groups. And we meet the issue, we break the silence, and then we step into breaking the cycle. And how you break the cycle is through education. You have to have education before you can take action. You have to know what to do. Our society lives in a sense of arrogance that I know how to protect my child. It's not going to happen to my child. It's not happening on my street, in my church, in my school, in my ballet studio, in my karate studio, in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. I know what to do. I know how to protect it. And that is an arrogance that has to be broken down, and to say we together as a society have to face this issue with education. We have to learn how to talk to a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old. We have to provide tools. Voice is working very diligently to provide cartoon characters and children's books and tools that parents can sit down and begin to break down this issue, to talk about not keeping a secret, to talk about personal boundaries, to talk about personal power, to talk about a plan of protection.
Let me just give you also an option for those listening. I know this is always hard, is that we open up the phone lines. They're always open. You could connect to us and be in a part. But since we're on this subject today, if you want to ask a question or engage or have a conversation on this, you're welcome to call for that reason too, and we can put you on the air. I think I figured out the whole technology thing. I've got like 18 buttons to push, and then I'm there. And but if you'd like to connect and ask a question, if maybe you're a mom or trying, because I know this, for me, this is at the very crux of this issue, is for a mother or a dad, for dad especially, you want to avoid anything in this conversation just because it's going to be uncomfortable all the way around. But for a young child, you're thinking, how can I keep them innocent? You're not trying to think, how can I keep them informed? And so if you have questions, or you'd like to engage in this or be in the conversation, you're welcome to do that. 770-781-9150. And if you don't want to be on the air, you can just call and just tell the person who answers the phone. They'll write down your question, and they'll bring it to us that way. So if you want to engage and actually be on the air, you tell them that. Or if you just have a question and want to get that in the conversation, you can do it that way. So either way, 770-781-9150.
I'll tell you, I know there's probably people shutting down right now. I'm going to tell you, I have met, and I don't, so you are in a specific area of counseling, but when you do counseling, you run across many things. And a few times I've met some wonderful parents that would never, ever let their children be harmed. But I've seen, in particular, I'm not picking on anybody, but especially women, that will find out an abuse has occurred to their daughter or their son, and something happens to their mind at that point, and part of it's denial. But they probably let the first instance go. And maybe in their mind, the denial is, well, it didn't happen like my child told me, or maybe they're embellishing this. And I've watched one child be abused repeatedly, first the initial abuse, then the parent ignoring it, and they don't even understand there's a second part of abuse, another punch in the stomach. And as you mentioned earlier, when the child comes to you and says this, that, or the other, of course, a parent's going to, why didn't you tell me before? And there's another punch in the gut. The child just wants to go crawl under a rock. How do you talk to parents of children? How would you speak to a woman who right now is depending on this man that this child is complaining about, doesn't want to rock the boat because if she says something, either the man is going to abuse her, leave the house, she's afraid, and then her breadwinner of the house is going to have to go to jail? I mean, what do you see happening in that mind of a parent once on one day they're saying, yes, I will always protect my child, then the child comes and says, hey, I've been abused, and then their mind starts going in all these different directions, and they start to shut down, don't even want to hear it, want to move on. Speak to that mom or dad.
I would speak to that sister in Christ that has to put her child's safety above everything. And so often there's a cycle there. So often that mother has been sexually abused, and that mother can't face her own demons. That mother can't look back, and there was no one there to protect her. So the cycle continues. I would say to that mother to find resources out there, to call 911, to get help. There is help. There is wonderful child advocacy centers that can step into this place and they can help step you through the process. She can contact voicetoday.org. We help with many families. We hold that mother's hand through the process. It's very painful. None of this is easy, but for you to step up and give your child the justice that they deserve, you tell that child, I love you and I'm here for you and I'm here to nurture you. And I promise you, we cancel hundreds and hundreds of survivors, and it's so seldom that the mother or the father steps in a place of protecting that child. So often it's met with denial, and that shuts a child down. That creates the lie of the enemy that child believes that I caused this. And then when the family is destroyed, that family unit, the child puts further blame. If I had just kept my mouth shut, I deserve this. We have to realize this is a crime. This is a crime that has to be reported. It does not matter if it's your husband, your father, your grandfather, your uncle, your best friend, your next door neighbor. We cannot hide this anymore. We have to realize that this is a crime and that perpetrator needs help. They need to be set free. They need help because they're living a life of destruction.
So often we turn my mic down. Sorry. I was going to say, so often we realize that God, his job and his command is that vengeance is his, but he gives us the responsibility of justice.
Yes.
And on the earth, that's pretty much where we have let down our guard, is the area of justice. And I think among men, we talked about the verse in Malachi, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the father. And I do believe the responsibility he's raising up men for, and women as well, but especially those with fathers' hearts, is to see that justice is done.
Yeah, it's Bob.
John,
a couple of things that you said. One, that the women react. One of the big problems is that the men do not react.
Yeah.
And when we do our workshops, I would say 95% of the attendees are women and mothers. And it's like the men don't see themselves as part of this process and responsible for protecting their children. And I think the other thing is, a couple of things that Angela said, when you remain silent, not only do you empower the predator to move forward onto other victims, but the predator still retains control over you. And they will, I mean, I had predators with controlling my life who had been dead 20 years until I could actually break my silence and find a way to forgive them and move on and put it behind me. So I think there are a lot of issues like that. The child is met with the parents ignoring them and denying that it can happen because they can't get their mind around the fact that Uncle Johnny or Aunt Susie or Grandpa or Dad would do this. But I can assure you that we talk to people every single day, and those are all realities. And so what we try to do, we have workshops that talk about the grooming process, which is the process that a predator uses to disarm a child and frankly disarm the parents so that they can then perpetrate the child. And what we teach a workshop does, so that people stop trying to say, gee, I can see that person and he looks like a predator. You know, that's the man in a trench coat in the park
yeah.
type of thing. You can't look at it that way. You have to look at behaviors and who is trying to occupy your child's time, who is helping you by taking your son or daughter out for ice cream, who's working to methodically have one-on-one time privately with your child. Those are the kinds of behaviors that should run up alarm systems for you.
I had an instance way back, and I'm just going to encourage anybody that feels like they can't share things. And again, Ray said you don't have to share on the air, but if you have a question, please give us a call. Happened to me. I was a young kid, about 11 years old, and it was the favorite uncle of the family. And he was favorite to my mom and dad. He was favorite to all the kids and all this stuff. And we were at his condominium. And this is another thing. I just never watched bowl games on New Year's Eve. It was New Year's Eve, Alabama and Notre Dame. And I just could care less about Alabama and Notre Dame the rest of my life since that night. But, you know, I'd gone to bed early. And I just remember, I just want to explain how it happened in my mind as a kid. Because I didn't think about it for years. And then, you know, 10 or 15 years go by and, yeah, that happened, you know. Anyway, so I'm asleep early. And Uncle Albert, I was in his bed. Oops, I said his name. So, but he's long gone now, but he still lives with me. And a little incident occurred there, and I was waking up going, So I got out of bed right away, and I went into the kitchen, got a glass of water, and I'm standing in there as a kid. Did that just happen? What is going on? So, you know, I didn't really want to get back in the bed, so I said, maybe it was a dream. Parents are in the next room sleeping. Get back in bed, and he's going at it again. And then I just got out of bed, and I just walked around the house. The rest of the night, my mom had gotten up and said, what are you up for? I said, I was just thirsty. Finally went back to bed and got way over on the edge of the bed. Nothing else happened. But from that day, you know, I never gave my parents an opportunity to deal with that. I didn't think, how could I tell them that the favorite uncle of the family, and maybe it didn't happen? Do you see that going through a kid's mind? It just never comes up. I didn't blame myself. It was just, I was bewildered.
But you never told.
He never attempted it again, but I didn't want to be around him that much anymore, and I didn't see any signs. I don't know if it happened to anybody else.
Of course it did. Of course it did.
Yeah.
But you got up, you resisted. You had some power. You had some personal power within you to try to, even leaving that room, you defended yourself from what was going to progress, obviously. But you kept the secret. You kept the silent. That's what we're teaching. We're teaching children, you have a voice. You have to speak out. If someone has touched you inappropriately, if someone's crossed your personal boundary, someone's touched your private parts, that's what we teach children. You have to speak out. You have to tell someone. And you have to tell someone until someone believes you. You have to continue to tell, because perhaps your mother may not have believed you. Perhaps your father may not have believed you. You needed to go on and tell someone else, because you have to, as a child listening to me today, if someone is touching you, please find someone safe in your life and tell them, because that memory that you keep that rolls around in your head, it will manifest itself somehow in a destructive behavior, because the enemy preys on silence and darkness.
Where's the balance, though? I don't want to alarm people, and all of a sudden they start looking at all the favorite uncles or all the ones that really love the children and say, "Oh no," you know. I know there's not a cut and dried, you know, little
any
list,
touch is inappropriate to your private parts. A child should not be touched.
Oh no, I know that part. I'm just saying, you know, a lot of people are going to be looking at like, you know, he really loves children. What does that mean?
No,
well, he might just love children.
Why don't we just ask our children? Has anyone ever touched you inappropriately? Why don't we have the conversation? Is there anyone that makes you feel uncomfortable? Why don't we have the conversation to say, you have a powerful no voice. Let's practice that no voice, and let's do some scenarios. You know, what if cousin Sue were to touch your private part? What would you do? And let's practice that. What would you do? Let's practice that no voice. Let's give them a plan of protection. Let's tell them to scream no. Let's tell them to run, and let's tell them to tell. Let's tell them that I will always believe you. I am here to protect you. There's no threat formed against me that I can't face. Let's go ahead and have those conversations before that child's faced with a threat, so that child knows what to do.
You know,
I think it's really interesting. We teach a workshop called Tough Talk to Tender Hearts, and I'm showing you folks the workbook from it.
for those of you who can see it on the radio.
Yeah.
They can go to our website and see it.
The workshop really educates parents how to talk to their children about their physical development, their sexual development, their private parts, and personal boundaries. And if you start early, you cannot start early enough with this. And so you educate your child so that when the time comes when someone approaches those boundaries inappropriately, you have empowered them to come and tell you. That's what the book is all about. That's what the workshop is all about. And if you don't do that, then the child is afraid to tell you. And most children will not tell their parents. And the myth that my child will tell me is dangerous on two sides. One, in our experience, the child does not tell the parents, period. The second thing is that once the child tells the parents, the damage is done. And the child has a long and difficult life